She had 60 seconds to decide, stay and face the humiliation, or run and prove everyone right, that she was destined to be alone forever. But before she could move, a small voice changed everything. They say the moments that change your life never come when you're ready for them. For Grace Sullivan, that moment arrived on Christmas Eve as she sat alone at table 7, with a shattered heart and tears she could no longer hold back. The snow was falling softly outside Bellini's Italian restaurant in Richmond, Virginia. Through the frost-kissed windows, Christmas lights twinkled like scattered stars, and inside the warm glow of candles danced across white tablecloths. Grace Sullivan sat perfectly still at table 7, her hands pressed flat against the crisp linen, willing herself to breathe. She was 31 years old. She wore her favorite emerald green dress, the one that made her feel beautiful on the rare occasions she allowed herself to feel that way. Around her neck hung her grandmother's pearl earrings, the only thing Nana had left her before passing away last spring. Grace had spent an hour on her makeup, tried on 3 different outfits, and turned down Christmas dinner with her family, all because her older sister Claire had promised, "Marcus is perfect for you. This time is different, Grace. Trust me." Grace had trusted her. She always trusted. That was her problem. Around her, the restaurant hummed with celebration. Children in tiny Christmas sweaters darted between tables. Couples held hands across candlelit dinners. Families raised glasses and laughed at inside jokes accumulated over decades of togetherness. And Grace sat alone, staring at the empty chair across from her. Marcus had arrived 20 minutes late. He didn't apologize. He didn't compliment her dress or notice the earrings that had belonged to someone she loved. He didn't even meet her eyes. He simply sat down, checked his phone twice, and delivered his announcement in the same flat tone someone might use to read a grocery list. "Look, I'm only here because my mother wouldn't stop nagging me. She thinks I need to settle down. But the thing is, I'm actually seeing someone already. It's complicated, so I'm not really available. Sorry you got all dressed up for nothing." Then he stood up and walked away. He didn't look back. He didn't offer another word. Grace felt the impact in her chest like a physical blow. Heat flooded her face. She glanced around the restaurant and saw the waiter watching her with unmistakable pity in his eyes. A couple at the next table turned away, pretending they hadn't witnessed her humiliation. They all saw. Every single one of them watched him leave. This wasn't the first time Grace had been rejected. There had been David, her boyfriend of 2 years, who ended things via text message because she was too sensitive. There had been Brian, who promised her a future and then vanished after 6 months without explanation. There had been Kevin, who told her she wasn't interesting enough to hold his attention. 7 years. 7 years of hoping and failing. At 31, Grace was beginning to believe that something was fundamentally broken inside her. She was the common denominator in every failed relationship. She was the reason nothing ever worked. Maybe she was simply meant to be alone. She pressed her palms harder against the tablecloth, fighting the tears that burned behind her eyes. Not here, not in front of all these happy people. But the tears came anyway, hot, insistent, unstoppable. She just needed 1 minute to compose herself, just 60 seconds to pull herself together. Then she would slip out quietly, drive home to her empty apartment, open a bottle of wine, and face the truth she'd been running from for years. She would be alone forever. And maybe that was exactly what she deserved. Grace was about to stand, about to make her escape, when a small voice spoke beside her. "Excuse me, are you okay?" Grace looked down. Standing next to her table was a little girl, perhaps 5 years old, with untamable golden curls that seemed to have a mind of their own, escaping in every direction like a halo around her face. She wore a red velvet dress with white trim, and a small bow was sliding out of her hair. But it was her eyes that stopped Grace cold. Large hazel eyes filled with genuine concern, studying Grace with an intensity that felt almost adult. Grace tried to force a smile. She failed. "I'm fine, sweetie. Thank you for asking." The little girl tilted her head, considering this response with visible skepticism. Then she shook her head slowly. "But you look really sad. My daddy says it's okay to be sad sometimes, but you shouldn't be sad all by yourself. That makes it worse." Something unlocked inside Grace's chest. A laugh escaped, watery and broken but real. That's very wise advice. My daddy's very smart, the girl announced with complete confidence. She pointed across the restaurant toward a table 3 rows away. That's him right there. He's not very good at braiding hair, but he makes really good pancakes on Saturdays. And he does the funniest voices when he reads stories. Grace followed the girl's gesture and saw a man rising quickly from his chair. Tall, dark-haired, mid-30s with warm brown eyes and an expression of complete mortification. He hurried toward them, reaching for the little girl's hand. "I am so sorry," he said, his voice carrying genuine embarrassment. "Rosie has absolutely no concept of boundaries." "I do too have boundaries," the little girl protested, crossing her small arms. "I just don't like them." Despite everything, despite the humiliation still burning in her chest, despite the tears still threatening to fall, despite the absolute wreckage of her evening, Grace laughed, really laughed. "Please don't apologize, she's wonderful." The man's shoulders relaxed slightly, but before he could respond, Rosie tugged on his sleeve with the urgent intensity only a 5-year-old can muster. "Daddy, the lady is all alone on Christmas Eve. That's really, really sad. Can we please eat dinner with her? Please? Pretty please with sugar and sprinkles and extra whipped cream?" The man's face flushed red. "Rosie, sweetheart, we can't just invite ourselves to—" "It's okay," Grace heard herself say. The words surprised her. She hadn't planned to say them, but they were out now, floating in the air between them. And somehow they felt right. Rosie's face transformed with joy. "I can tell you about my Christmas list. I asked Santa for a purple bicycle and also a dog. But Daddy says maybe on the dog. Maybe means probably not, but I'm still hoping really hard." Grace looked at the man, at Daniel, she would soon learn, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, the kind of connection that only people who have known real loneliness can share. He extended his hand. "I'm Daniel, Daniel Harris, and this little negotiator is Rosemary, but everyone calls her Rosie." "Everyone except Grandma when I'm in trouble," Rosie added helpfully. "Then she says Rosemary Claire Harris in a really loud voice that makes my ears hurt." Grace shook his hand. His grip was warm and steady. "I'm Grace. Grace Sullivan." Daniel hesitated, clearly weighing the decision. Then he smiled, a genuine smile that reached all the way to his eyes and transformed his entire face. "Would you like some company, Grace? No pressure at all, but I'm told the breadsticks here are the best in the whole wide world." Grace looked at them, this earnest man with the gentleness in his gaze and his irrepressible daughter with the sliding bow, and felt a warmth spread through her chest. Something dangerous, something fragile, something that felt terrifyingly like hope. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'd like that very much." Rosie squealed with delight and climbed into the chair Marcus had abandoned, immediately launching into a detailed explanation of why Rapunzel was obviously the best Disney princess. "She has the longest hair, and she has a chameleon named Pascal who changes colors and doesn't judge people for their choices." Daniel caught Grace's eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry," over his daughter's head. Grace shook her head, smiling through the tears she'd finally stopped fighting. For the next 2 hours, she laughed more than she had in months. Rosie told her about school, about her best friend Emma, who could burp the alphabet, about the purple bicycle she was absolutely certain Santa would bring. Daniel shared stories about his work as an architect, about his failed attempts at French braiding, about the time he accidentally dyed all of Rosie's White Sox pink. But when Rosie fell asleep against her father's shoulder, her small hand still clutching a breadstick, the energy at the table shifted. Daniel looked at Grace with eyes that had learned to hope again. "There's something I need to tell you," he said quietly, "about my wife, about why we're here alone on Christmas Eve." Grace felt her heart rate quicken. She waited, and what he told her next would change everything she thought she knew about love, about loss, and about what it truly means to be brave. Daniel's gaze drifted toward the window, where snow continued to fall in soft, silent waves. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. "My wife, Lily, passed away 3 years ago. Rosie was only 2. Grace remained silent, giving him space to continue. It was a rare autoimmune condition, the kind of thing that sounds like it only happens to other people, until it happens to you. He swallowed hard. It attacked her organs one by one. First her kidneys, then her liver, then her heart. 8 months of fighting. 8 months of watching the person I loved most in the world slowly disappear. Grace felt tears sliding down her own cheeks now, but she made no move to wipe them away. Those last few weeks, Lily couldn't even sit up anymore, but she spent every conscious moment teaching me things: how to braid Rosie's hair, which songs she liked before bed, how to handle the nightmares. His voice cracked. She wrote letters for Rosie, letters to be opened on her 10th birthday, her 16th birthday, her graduation day, her wedding day. Letters our daughter will read from a mother she'll barely remember. Daniel paused, composing himself. The last thing Lily said to me was, "Promise me you'll keep living, not just surviving, living. Promise me you'll let yourself be happy again." "Did you?" Grace asked gently. "Keep that promise?" Daniel laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "No, not for a long time." He looked at his sleeping daughter, and his eyes filled with a sorrow so deep it seemed bottomless. "That first year I was just a ghost. I woke up, fed Rosie, drove her to daycare, went to work, came home, fed her again, read her a story, put her to bed. Then I'd sit in the dark until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. Repeat, every single day." "That sounds exhausting." "It was surviving. It wasn't living." Daniel's jaw tightened. "My mother moved in to help, but I was there without being there. Present but empty, a father-shaped hole where a real father should have been." Grace reached across the table and touched his hand. He didn't pull away. "I was angry," he continued, "at everything, at the universe for taking her, at God for letting it happen, at myself for not being able to save her. There were nights I'd sit in my car in the garage for hours, just not wanting to go inside, not wanting to face the house that still smelled like her perfume, the closet still full of her clothes, the half-finished book on her nightstand that she'd never get to finish. Daniel, I'm not telling you this for pity," he said quickly. "I'm telling you because you need to understand what changed." He took a deep breath. "One night, about a year after Lily died, Rosie woke up screaming from a nightmare. She was calling for her mother. 'Mama! Mama!' And I ran to her room as fast as I could." His voice wavered. "She looked up at me with those big hazel eyes, Lily's eyes, and she asked me something that shattered what was left of my heart. She asked, 'Daddy, do you still love me? Or are you going to go away too, like Mama did?'" Grace pressed her hand to her mouth, unable to speak. "My 3-year-old daughter thought I was going to abandon her, because in every way that mattered, I already had. I was physically present, but emotionally gone. I was breathing but not living, and she knew. Children always know." Daniel lifted his gaze to meet Grace's eyes directly. "That was my wake-up call. That was the moment I realized I had a choice. I could keep drowning in my grief, or I could honor Lily's last wish and actually live for the daughter we made together." "So what did you do?" "I let Rosie save me," he said simply. "She'd ask me to read stories, so I read stories. She'd ask me to play Tea Party, so I played Tea Party. She'd ask me to watch the same cartoon for the 100th time, so I watched it. And slowly, so slowly I barely noticed it happening, I started to feel things again. I started to remember what joy felt like." He squeezed Grace's hand. "But I never thought I'd feel this again. What I'm feeling right now, sitting here with you, I didn't think it was possible." He paused. "Until tonight, until my daughter was braver than I've ever been and walked up to a stranger's table." Grace didn't know what to say. Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "I don't know where this goes," Daniel said quietly. "I don't know if you even want it to go anywhere, but I'd like to find out if you'll let me." Grace looked at this man, this wounded, beautiful man who had lost everything and somehow found the courage to keep going. And she made a decision. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd like that too." The next 3 months unfolded like a dream Grace was afraid to wake from. They took things slowly. Coffee dates that turned into 4-hour conversations, dinners at quiet restaurants where they talked about everything and nothing. Saturday afternoons at the park with Rosie, who had designated Grace her official best adult friend who isn't family. Saturday morning pancakes became sacred, chocolate chip for Rosie, blueberry for Daniel, plain with too much syrup for Grace. They developed routines, inside jokes, a shared language of looks and touches that needed no words. Grace learned the small details of Daniel's life. He drank his coffee black. He sketched building designs when he was anxious. He still wore his wedding ring on a chain around his neck, hidden beneath his shirt, close to his heart. Rosie shared everything with Grace. Stories about school, complaints about her frenemy Madison, who always hogged the good crayons, detailed accounts of dreams where she visited her mother in a garden made of flowers that could talk. "I dreamed about Mama last night," Rosie announced one Saturday morning, syrup dripping down her chin. "She said she's still here, just where I can't see her, like hide and seek, but forever." Grace looked at Daniel, uncertain how to respond. He had frozen at the stove, spatula in hand, his back rigid. "Did she say anything else, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. "She said she's happy that Daddy isn't sad anymore. And she said Grace is nice." Rosie tilted her head thoughtfully. "I think Mama would like Grace. Don't you think so, Daddy?" Daniel turned slowly. His eyes met Grace's across the kitchen, and something passed between them. Gratitude, fear, hope, all tangled together. "Yeah, baby," he said softly. "I think Mama would like Grace very much." But happiness, Grace was learning, rarely arrives without tests. In May, she attended Rosie's kindergarten spring recital at Riverside Elementary. Rosie had been cast as a tulip, the most important flower because it blooms first and tells everyone spring is here. And she had been practicing her one line for weeks. Grace arrived early and found herself seated next to Margaret Harris, Daniel's mother. Margaret was 63, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with a spine so straight it seemed to be made of steel. She had been polite during their previous encounters, but distant, always watching Grace with an evaluating gaze that made her feel like she was being measured against some invisible standard. "So," Margaret said as they waited for the performance to begin, "Daniel tells me you're a teacher." "Yes, ma'am. Kindergarten at Riverside Elementary." "Good school. Rosie will attend in the fall." Silence stretched between them. Then Margaret spoke again, her voice low and deliberate. "My son has endured more than any person should have to bear. He lost the love of his life. He spent an entire year as a ghost in his own home, going through the motions while his soul was somewhere else entirely. Rosie was the only thing that kept him tethered to this world." "I know," Grace said quietly. "Do you?" Margaret's eyes were piercing. "Do you know what it was like for me to watch my son sit in his car in the garage for hours, not wanting to come inside? Do you know what it was like to hear my granddaughter ask if her daddy was going to go away like Mama did?" Grace felt cold spread through her chest. "Daniel told me." "Then you understand why I need to be certain about you." Margaret's voice hardened. "I've watched other women try to get close to my son. Some wanted a project, a broken man to fix so they could feel needed. Others saw a handsome architect with a good income and thought they'd won some kind of lottery. None of them saw him. None of them understood what loving Daniel actually means. And what does it mean? It means loving the ghost of Lily, too. It means accepting that she will always be part of this family, even though she's gone. It means understanding that sometimes Daniel will look at you and see someone else. It means being okay with never being his first love." Margaret leaned closer. "Can you live with that? Honestly?" Grace didn't answer immediately. She let the question sit, giving it the weight it deserved. "I don't know," she finally said. "I've never loved anyone the way I love Daniel. I've never had to share someone with a memory. But I know that I want to try. And I know that I would never, never do anything to hurt him or Rosie." Margaret studied her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "This family has been broken once. I will not allow it to break again." The lights dimmed before Grace could respond. The children filed onto stage in their flower costumes, and Rosie waved frantically when she spotted them in the audience. Grace waved back, smiling, but inside she felt something cold take root. She didn't know if she had passed Margaret's test. She wasn't sure there was a way to pass it. The next 2 weeks were agony. Daniel became distant. He canceled dinner plans, citing work deadlines. His text responses grew shorter, delayed. The warmth that had been building between them seemed to be cooling, pulling back like a tide retreating from shore. Grace prepared herself for another ending, another failure to add to her collection, another confirmation that she simply wasn't meant to be loved. Then her phone rang at 2 in the morning. Daniel's voice was barely recognizable, raw, shaking, stripped of all composure. Grace, Rosie is sick. High fever. We're at St. Mary's Hospital. I don't, I don't know who else to call. My mom is here, but I needed to hear your voice. I needed, his voice broke. Grace didn't ask questions. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think. She threw on clothes and drove. Grace found Daniel in the pediatric waiting room, hunched over in a plastic chair, his head in his hands, his shoulders trembling. She didn't announce herself. She simply sat down beside him and wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close. I can't go through this again, he whispered against her shoulder. Not after Lily. I'm not strong enough. You're stronger than you know, and you're not alone this time. Daniel lifted his head and looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in 2 weeks. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face haggard with fear. What did my mother say to you? At the recital? Grace hesitated. She was protecting you. And Rosie. What did she say, Grace? That loving you means loving Lily's memory too. That this family has been broken once and she won't let it break again. Grace paused. She asked if I could live with never being your first love. Daniel closed his eyes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I've been pulling away because I thought maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe I would just end up hurting you. And now? He opened his eyes. Now I know that when I'm terrified, when I think I might be losing the most important person in my world, the only person I want beside me is you. That has to mean something. Before Grace could respond, Margaret appeared at the end of the hallway. She stopped when she saw them, saw Grace holding her son, saw Daniel finally allowing himself to lean on someone else. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Margaret walked toward them. Her face was tired, but her eyes were softer than Grace had ever seen them. The doctor says it's just a severe ear infection, she said. Antibiotics will clear it up. Rosie will be released in the morning. Daniel's entire body sagged with relief. He buried his face in Grace's shoulder, and she held him while the terror of the past few hours finally released its grip. When he composed himself enough to go check on Rosie, Margaret sat down in the chair beside Grace. You came, she said simply. Of course I came. At 2 o'clock in the morning. No questions, no hesitation. You just came. Grace met the older woman's eyes. I love them. Both of them. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Lily would have liked you. She had good instincts about people. Better than mine, honestly. She would have seen what I finally see tonight. What do you see? Someone who shows up. Someone who doesn't run when things get hard. Margaret placed her weathered hand over Grace's. I was wrong to test you the way I did. I was so afraid of this family breaking again that I almost broke it myself. You were protecting them, I understand. Protect them with me, Margaret said. That's all I ask. It was an invitation, an acceptance, a blessing finally given. After that night at the hospital, everything changed. The walls came down completely. Grace became part of their daily rhythm. Weeknight dinners, weekend adventures, Saturday morning pancakes that had become a sacred family tradition. Daniel stopped holding back, stopped protecting himself from the possibility of being hurt again. In July, they drove to Virginia Beach for a family vacation. Margaret came too, to make sure Daniel doesn't let Rosie eat nothing but ice cream for 3 days straight. Rosie built sandcastles with architectural precision that made Daniel beam with pride. That's my girl, strong foundation, excellent structural support. Daddy, it's just a sandcastle, not a real building. All castles are buildings, sweetheart, even the sandy ones. Grace helped Rosie collect shells along the shoreline, sorting them into categories that made sense only to a 6-year-old. Pretty ones, weird ones, ones that look like they have faces, and ones I'm saving for Grandma, even though she probably won't want them. On their second evening, after Rosie had fallen asleep and Margaret had volunteered to stay in the hotel room with her, Daniel asked Grace to walk with him along the beach. The moon hung low over the Atlantic, casting a silver path across the dark water. The waves rolled in gently, rhythmically, like the breathing of some vast sleeping creature. They walked in comfortable silence, their shoes dangling from their hands, their feet sinking into cool, wet sand. Finally, Daniel stopped walking. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I spent 3 years believing I would never feel this way again," he said. "I thought that part of me had died with Lily. I thought I had used up all the love I was capable of, and there was simply nothing left." "Daniel, let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "Then you appeared, sitting alone at that table with tears in your eyes, and my daughter was braver than I have ever been. She walked up to a complete stranger and asked if she was okay, and everything changed." Grace felt tears sliding down her cheeks, warm against her skin in the cool night air. "I'm not trying to replace Lily. I could never do that, and I wouldn't want to. She will always be Rosie's mother. She will always be my first love. But I've learned something important over these past months. Love isn't a finite resource. It doesn't run out. It grows. It expands. There's room for grief and joy, for memories of the past and hope for the future." He squeezed her hands. "What I'm trying to say, badly probably, is that I love you, Grace. I love you in a way I didn't think I was capable of anymore. And I believe there's room in our lives for you. Not as a replacement for what we lost, but as something new, something that belongs only to us." "I love you too," Grace whispered. "Both of you. I didn't expect it to happen this fast, but it did. And I'm not sorry. I'm not scared. I'm just grateful." Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could feel his heart beating against her chest. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other while the waves rolled in and the moon watched overhead, bearing witness to the moment two broken people decided to build something whole. August arrived, and with it, Rosie's 6th birthday. The party was beautiful chaos, a bouncy castle in the backyard, a face painter who turned every child into either a butterfly or a superhero, more cupcakes than any reasonable group of humans should consume in one afternoon. Grace had helped Daniel plan everything. She'd blown up balloons until she was dizzy, arranged the gift table, coordinated with the entertainer, and spent 20 minutes convincing Rosie that, no, she could not have a real pony at her party, but yes, she could have pony-shaped cookies. As the celebration wound down and exhausted parents began collecting their sugar-crashed children, Grace sat alone at one of the picnic tables, watching the party decorations sag in the late afternoon heat. A familiar fear crept back, uninvited. What if this is as good as it gets? What if I'm still just a guest in their lives? Welcome, but temporary. What if I never truly belong? Then Rosie appeared at her elbow, her butterfly face paint-smudged, her sunshine curls escaping from their ponytail, her expression unusually serious. "Grace, can I ask you something? It's really, really important." Grace felt her heart skip. "Of course, sweetheart. Anything." Rosie climbed onto the bench beside her, her small legs swinging. She was quiet for a moment, clearly gathering courage for something big. "Are you going to come to all my birthday parties? Like every single one? Forever and ever until I'm super old?" Grace's breath caught. "Do you want me to?" "I really, really want you to. I want you to come to all of them. Even when I'm a teenager and Daddy says I'll probably be grumpy and not want parties anymore." Rosie paused, her face scrunching with concentration. "I want you to be part of my family, like Grandma Margaret is part of my family. Can you be my family too?" Grace felt tears building behind her eyes. "Oh, Rosie." "Because I love you," Rosie continued, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. "And Daddy loves you. I can tell because he smiles way more now, and he doesn't sit in his car in the garage anymore. And you love us too, right? So you should be my family. That's just how it works." Grace looked over Rosie's shoulder and saw Daniel standing a few feet away watching them. His eyes were glistening. She turned back to the little girl beside her. This fierce, brave, beautiful child who had walked up to a crying stranger on Christmas Eve and changed the course of 3 lives. You know what, Rosie? The night I met you, I thought my life was over. I thought I would be sad and alone forever. I thought nobody would ever love me. That's really silly, Rosie said matter-of-factly. Grace laughed through her tears. You're right, it was silly. Because then you walked up to my table and asked me a question. Do you remember what it was? Rosie nodded solemnly. I asked if you were okay. You did. And that one question, that one brave, kind, beautiful question, changed everything. Grace pulled her close. Yes, Rosie, I will be your family. I want to be yours. Forever and ever, until you're super old, even older than 30. Rosie giggled and threw her arms around Grace's neck. That's settled then. I'm going to go tell Daddy. She scrambled off the bench and ran toward Daniel, who scooped her up and spun her around while she shouted, She said yes! She said yes! Grace is my family now. Margaret appeared beside Grace, 2 cups of lemonade in her hands. She offered one to Grace and sat down. She asked you, didn't she? The family question? Grace nodded, wiping her eyes. She did. Rosie doesn't ask things lightly. When she decides something, she means it completely. Margaret took a sip of her lemonade. She gets that from her mother. It was the first time Margaret had mentioned Lily without pain in her voice. Progress, Grace thought. Healing. Thank you, Grace said quietly, for giving me a chance. Thank you for being worth the chance. October came, painting the Virginia landscape in shades of gold and crimson. 10 months had passed since Christmas Eve. Daniel made a reservation at Bellini's Italian restaurant, table 7, the same table where Grace had sat alone, where Rosie had approached her, where everything had begun. Grace wore her emerald green dress, deliberately, intentionally, honoring the place where her story had changed. They ate dinner slowly, savoring every moment. They talked about the past year, about all the ways their lives had transformed, about the future stretching out before them, full of possibility. After the plates were cleared, Daniel reached across the table and took both of Grace's hands in his. I'm not asking you to marry me tonight, he said, and Grace felt her heart do a complicated flip between disappointment and understanding. Because I want to do this right, and I want Rosie to be there when that moment comes. She's part of this story too, maybe the most important part. Then what are you asking? Daniel's gaze held hers with an intensity that took her breath away. I'm asking you to be part of our family, officially, completely. I'm asking you to let us be part of yours. I'm asking you to build a life with me and Rosie, not a replacement for what was lost, but something new, something that belongs to all 3 of us. Grace didn't need to think. She didn't need to weigh pros and cons or consider alternatives or protect herself from the possibility of being hurt. Yes, she said. Yes, Daniel. To all of it. Yes. He called Rosie immediately. She'd been waiting by the phone at Margaret's house, practically vibrating with anticipation. Daddy, did you ask her? What did she say? Tell me, tell me, tell me. The entire restaurant turned to look at them as Rosie's voice exploded through the speaker, but neither Grace nor Daniel cared. She said, yes, sweetheart. Grace is officially going to be part of our family. The squeal that followed was so loud that Daniel had to hold the phone away from his ear. In the background, they could hear Margaret laughing and saying something about finally having another woman in the house to balance out all the chaos. The next morning, Grace arrived at Daniel's house at 9 o'clock sharp, carrying fresh strawberries and whipped cream for celebration pancakes. Rosie threw open the door before Grace even reached the porch, launching herself into Grace's arms with full-body enthusiasm. You came! You came! I knew you would come! Of course I came, silly girl. I promised, didn't I? I'll always come. In the kitchen, Daniel was already mixing pancake batter, flour dusting his dark hair. Margaret was setting the table with the efficiency of someone who had been managing family meals for decades. When they saw Grace, both of them smiled. Welcome to the family, Margaret said, then softer. Properly this time. No more tests. They made pancakes together. Batter splattered across the counter, chocolate chips scattered across the floor. Rosie insisted on helping, which meant everything took twice as long and created 3 times the mess. Nobody cared. When they finally sat down around the table, 4 plates of imperfect pancakes, 4 glasses of orange juice, 4 people who had somehow found each other, Rosie raised her glass with ceremonial solemnity. "I want to make a toast," she announced, "to family, to Grace, who is the best family ever, to Daddy, who finally got brave, to Grandma, who makes the best cookies even though she pretends they're not that special, and to me for walking over to that lady's table on Christmas Eve, even though Daddy said I didn't have boundaries." "I stand by that statement," Daniel said, grinning. "Grandma told me that's what brave people do," Rosie declared. "And Mama was brave, so I want to be brave like her." The table went quiet for a moment, not with sadness, but with something softer, remembrance, honor. Then Margaret raised her glass. "To family, all of it, the ones who are here, the ones we carry with us, and the ones who find us when we need them most." "To family," they echoed together. Later that evening, after the dishes were washed and Rosie was finally asleep, Grace stepped onto the back porch and called her sister. "Claire, it's me." "Grace, how was the big dinner? Did everything go okay?" Grace smiled into the darkness. "You were right. Not about Marcus. He was a complete disaster. But you were right that I needed to stop hiding, that I needed to take a chance." "So it worked out? With Daniel?" "It worked out. He asked me to be part of his family. Officially." Claire squealed so loudly that Grace had to hold the phone away from her ear, a reaction that reminded her, suddenly and powerfully, of Rosie. "I knew it," Claire shouted. "I knew you'd find someone. I just didn't know it would take a 5-year-old to make the introduction." Grace laughed. "She's 6 now, and she's the bravest person I've ever met. Tell her thank you from her Aunt Claire. She did what I've been trying to do for years. She got you to stop running from love." After they hung up, Grace stood alone on the porch, looking up at the October stars. A year ago, she had been convinced she would spend her life alone. She had believed, truly believed, that she was fundamentally unlovable. And then a little girl in a red velvet dress had walked up to her table and asked a simple question. "Excuse me, are you okay?" No, Grace thought. I wasn't okay. I was broken and scared and ready to give up. But I am now. I am okay now. Daniel stepped onto the porch behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "About how much can change in a year. About how wrong I was about everything." She turned in his arms to face him. "About how grateful I am that your daughter has absolutely no respect for boundaries." Daniel laughed softly. "She gets that from her mother. Lily never met a stranger. She just met friends she hadn't talked to yet. I wish I could have known her." "In a way, you do. Every time Rosie does something brave and reckless, every time she sees someone hurting and refuses to walk away, that's Lily. That's the best of who she was, living on in our daughter." Grace reached up and touched his face. "I love you, Daniel Harris. You and your fearless daughter and your grumpy mother and all the beautiful, broken pieces that make up your family." "Our family," he corrected gently. "It's our family now." And standing there in the cool October night, wrapped in the arms of a man she'd met because his 5-year-old daughter didn't understand boundaries, Grace finally understood something she'd been searching for her entire life. Sometimes the worst moments are actually doorways. Sometimes you have to sit alone at a restaurant table, heartbroken and humiliated, before you can be found by the people who will change everything. Sometimes it takes a child with no concept of boundaries to see what adults miss entirely. That lonely people shouldn't be lonely alone. That kindness costs nothing but means everything. That family isn't about blood or marriage or legal documents, but about who shows up when you need them. Grace had walked into Bellini's on Christmas Eve expecting nothing. She had been prepared to give up on love, on hope, on the possibility of ever belonging to someone. Instead, she had found everything. And it had all started with the bravest question in the world. "Excuse me, are you okay?" If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that hope exists even in the darkest moments, if it made you believe that unexpected beginnings can lead to beautiful endings, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you are never as alone as you feel. Sometimes your family is just waiting for you to be brave enough to let them find you.